Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today we have an extra long ProRevenge story that was submitted to us via email from a listener who has decided to remain anonymous. This story is 6 times longer than what we normally feature on this channel, and it took a very long time to record and edit this one. So if you appreciate the longer stories, I encourage you to add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, make sure to drop a like on the video and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Alright, grab a drink and some cookies, and let's jump right in. Chapter 1, The Frayed Garland. The early December evening settled over the neighborhood, illuminating the cul-de-sac in a soft glow. Strings of lights twinkled on every porch, candy cane stakes lined driveways, and inflatable snowmen bobbed gently in the chill breeze. It was exactly as it had been for years, every house showcasing its unique holiday flair. In our home, we always took pride in the subtle elegance of warm, white lights draped along the gutters, a wreath with red bows on the door, and a few beloved nutcracker figures stationed just inside the foyer. Familiar touches that once made me smile now felt oddly distant. I lingered by our front window, staring out at the street. The outline of the family across the way, the Robsons, moved in cheerful silhouettes behind the curtains, likely decorating their own tree. My wife, Laura, and I used to do that in sync with our neighbors, an unspoken holiday tradition. We never said it out loud, but it was always a quiet thrill to know that, while we decorated, other couples on the block were doing the same. I'd glance out and catch a glimpse of someone lifting a child to place a star atop their tree, or see neighbors laughing over tangled lights. It felt communal, warm, and reassuring, as if all of us had entered this unspoken pact to make the darkest month bright and meaningful. This year, it was different. Our tree stood half-finished. Boxes of ornaments still sprawled on the living room floor, waiting patiently for the hands that would place them. The lights were coiled in tidy loops, ready to be strung. Usually, Laura and I tackled this together, laughing over old photos stored away with the ornaments, playing soft carols, sipping mulled wine. We'd argue lightheartedly over where to place a particular heirloom ornament or which branch needed more tinsel. Small rituals gave the holiday a texture and depth I cherished. But tonight, Laura was absent. Well, not physically. She was in the house somewhere, but it felt like her presence had receded, like a tide leaving the shore exposed and barren. I heard her in the kitchen earlier, rummaging through drawers. Then, silence. I'd called her to join me in finishing the tree, and she said she'd be right there. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, I walked into the kitchen and found her leaning against the counter, scrolling through her phone, her posture guarded. She looked up for a split second and gave a tight smile. "Be right there," she repeated, as if I'd caught her off guard. I hadn't pressed her. There was a time I would have asked what she was reading or who she was talking to, and she would have laughed and shared a funny text from a friend or a silly meme. Now I hesitated. Something in her demeanor said, "Don't ask." And I didn't want to be that suspicious husband who demanded explanations. So I nodded, went back to the living room, and waited some more. As I stared out the window, I thought back to last Christmas and the one before that. Laura and I had been married for 8 years, together for 10. We married young, but not foolishly. We'd known each other's quirks, supported each other's careers, and established our own comforting routines. Each December, we turned the house into a cozy holiday haven. She brought the whimsical flair, ugly sweater parties, new cookie recipes, glittery ornaments, while I brought the earnest traditions, carefully reusing the same angel topper my grandmother once placed on her tree. Together, we created something balanced and joyful. Now, she acted as if these traditions were obligations, or worse, interruptions. This year, she'd come home late 3 nights in a row, claiming she had to finish a big project at work. I'd believed her at first, after all, deadlines happen, but her distant eyes and quick swipes on her phone, the stiff excuses whenever I asked what kept her at the office so long, these things piled up. She'd promised we'd decorate the tree tonight, but apparently Her phone demanded more attention than I did. I turned from the window and surveyed the scene. A half-lit tree, unopened boxes of garland and ornaments, a plate of ginger cookies I'd baked in an attempt to lure her into the holiday spirit. The cookies remained untouched. The soft strains of a Christmas playlist drifted from the speaker, but I realized it had cycled through the same album twice without either of us commenting. The silence between songs felt heavier than it should have. My gaze landed on a photo hanging on the wall. Laura and me on our first married Christmas, standing outside in the snow, arms wrapped around each other, her laughter frozen in time. Back then, we didn't have much money, so we made our decorations by hand. Strings of popcorn and cranberries, hand-sewn stockings. We looked proud and happy in that photo, as if the future were full of promise. I shook my head to banish the ache of nostalgia. We were older now, stable, had everything we needed. What had changed? There was a click of footsteps in the hallway, and Laura entered the living room. She wore a sweater dress and leggings, not her usual holiday prep attire. But I tried not to read into that. Her phone was still in her hand, the screen dark, as if she'd forced herself to turn it off just before walking in. "Let's finish up, huh?" she said, a note of impatience under her casual tone. "Sure." I managed to smile and hoped I looked genuine. I moved to the tree and offered her a strand of lights. She took it and started draping it across the branches, too quickly and carelessly, I noticed. Normally, she would circle the tree slowly, making sure the lights were evenly spaced, stepping back to admire her work. Tonight, she wound them without pausing, leaving awkward gaps and bunches. When I tried to adjust them, she sighed. "Is it really that important?" she asked quietly. And then, as if realizing how off that sounded, she added, "I'm just tired, okay? Let's get this done." My stomach twisted. A simple moment decorating a tree now felt forced, as if we were completing a chore neither of us wanted. I swallowed my frustration and busied myself with the ornaments. I pulled out a few special ones, the ceramic angel I'd had since childhood, the painted glass ornament we bought on our honeymoon, and the wooden snowflake handcrafted by her father. I offered her one, the snowflake, holding it out like a peace offering. She glanced at it, nodded vaguely, and placed it on a random branch at eye level, then stepped back, arms folded. "I think that's enough for tonight," she said after only a few minutes of work. "I need to go over some documents for tomorrow's meeting." "So soon?" I said, trying to keep my voice light. "We've barely started." She shrugged, giving the tree a cursory look. "It looks fine, we'll do the rest later." "Later?" I said, hearing a slight tremor in my own voice. Christmas wasn't far off, and usually by this time, our house would be fully decorated. This was something we loved doing together. At least, I thought we did. Her dismissiveness sent a pang through my chest. I wanted to ask what was wrong, what changed, why she seemed so disconnected from everything we once enjoyed. But the air between us felt fragile, like one too direct question could shatter it. I watched her leave. She carried her phone as if it were an extension of herself. In the silence she left behind, the Christmas music felt mocking. I turned it off. I stood there, surrounded by half-unpacked decorations, feeling more alone than I had in years. The kitchen counter remained a place for her to lean and scroll through messages while I tried to bake cookies. I'd saved a recipe from her grandmother's cookbook, ginger snaps with candied orange peel, hoping the familiar taste would draw her out. She gave them a nibble, said they were fine, and wandered off, phone in hand. Each time I tried to engage her, I felt a silent barrier. My attempts at conversation met with vague hums or shrugs. The phone was always there, an invisible curtain between us. I started to watch her more closely. She'd look at her screen and smile sometimes, a small curve of the lips she never shared with me. When I asked who she was texting, she'd mumble work people or a friend from the office. Her tone left no room for follow-up questions. Could I be imagining this distance? I tried to reason with myself. The holidays can be stressful. Maybe her workload had genuinely increased. Maybe she was feeling pressured or depressed. Winter did that to some people. But deep down, I sensed something else, something more insidious. Her absence wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She wasn't simply tired, she was tuned out, detached, present in body but not in spirit. For the first time, I wondered if she was hiding something. I remembered how she used to drape herself over my shoulder as we wrote out Christmas cards together, adding little jokes and personal notes. This year, she handed me the list and asked if I could handle it. She had to jump on a call, she said, disappearing upstairs for an hour. When I finished, I asked if we could sign the cards together. She just gave a non-committal sigh and said, tomorrow, maybe. We were drifting, and I was starting to resent her phone like a rival lover, always stealing her attention. Except the truth was that I had no idea where her attention truly lay. The phone was just a symptom. The disease was something else. I realized I needed to find answers, even if I feared what they might be. Late one night, a week before Christmas, after the lights on the tree had finally been placed, by me alone, I heard Laura whispering in the kitchen. She was supposed to be asleep. Curiosity overcame my fear of seeming suspicious. I crept halfway down the stairs and saw a faint light from her phone screen illuminating her face. She was smiling softly, the kind of smile I remembered from our early days together. Only now, it wasn't directed at me. She laughed quietly at something on the screen and typed a quick reply. Then, as if sensing my presence, she glanced around nervously, tapped the phone dark, and slipped back upstairs. I stood there, alone in the dim hallway, the smell of pine and ginger still lingering. The holiday cheer felt like a veneer over something rotten. I couldn't deny the truth any longer. Something was very wrong between us, and it likely wasn't just stress. It might be something that would threaten everything we'd built. As I returned to bed, I tried to calm the mounting panic. I needed a plan. Perhaps I was overreacting. Perhaps I should simply talk to her again, but talking had gotten me nowhere. She brushed aside my concerns, left my holiday gestures unanswered. The more I tried to be understanding, the more distant she grew. For now, I'd keep my eyes open. I wouldn't rush to confrontation. The holiday season was supposed to bring people closer, yet here we stood on the precipice of something that could tear us apart. In the morning, I'd try another approach, maybe ask if there was something she wanted to share, or suggest couples counseling after the new year. Something, anything to bridge the gap. But as I drifted into restless sleep, I knew in my heart that I would need more than gentle prodding. I would need evidence, and if my worst fears were confirmed, I would need a way to protect myself. The wreath on the door, the twinkling lights outside, and the half-decorated tree inside felt like mocking witnesses to the unraveling of my marriage. If only I knew how far I'd be willing to go when I found out the truth. Chapter 2: Broken Traditions. The next morning, I woke to the faint hum of Laura's hairdryer drifting through the closed bathroom door. Dawn light filtered through our bedroom curtains, revealing dust motes suspended in still air. I stared at the ceiling, remembering the uneasy silence of the previous night and the half-hearted ornament hung on our tree. It felt like waking from a dream I didn't want to revisit, yet there I was, pinned under the weight of it all. I pulled on a robe and padded into the hall. The scent of coffee normally beckoned me downstairs. Normally during the holiday season, Laura and I had a ritual. We would wake together on weekends, brew fresh coffee, and sip it beside the tree. We'd talk about holiday plans, visits to family, what new ornament we might buy, which neighbors to invite for mulled wine, just quiet, happy moments that set the tone for the day. But today, as I descended, I found the coffee maker empty, the kitchen silent. She had left it all for me to do. Another small sign that things were off. Trying not to make too much of it, I brewed a pot of Colombian blend and poured myself a mug. I'd planned for us to visit the Christmas market that afternoon. We always made a point of picking out one special new ornament each year, something that told a story or represented our lives at the moment. On our first married Christmas, it was a hand-painted ceramic bell from a local artisan. The second year, we bought a tiny glass globe etched with our initials. Over the years, we'd added a miniature sleigh, a porcelain snowman, and even a quirky felt reindeer with crooked antlers. Little artifacts that, strung together, charted the course of our marriage. This year, I wondered what we'd pick. A star, an angel, a wooden nutcracker, if we even chose anything at all, if she even wanted to come. Laura emerged from upstairs wearing a knee-length wool coat and boots with low heels. Her hair, still slightly damp, fell in neat waves around her shoulders. She offered a faint smile as she entered the kitchen. I tried to read her expression. Was it strained, forced, or was I projecting my fears onto every gesture? "Morning," I said, trying for warmth. "Coffee's fresh." "Thanks," she replied. She took a mug and poured herself some coffee, adding a splash of milk, no sugar. She took one sip, then immediately reached for her phone, scanning it as though expecting urgent news. I stood there, my mug raised halfway to my lips, watching her. "I was thinking," I began after a moment, "the Christmas market is today. We always pick up our new ornament around this time. Want to head over after lunch?" She raised her eyes from her screen, blinking as if I'd startled her out of a trance. "Oh, yeah, I guess." Her voice lacked enthusiasm. "I'm a bit busy, but I can spare some time." Busy with what on a Saturday morning, I wondered. It's the weekend before Christmas. She'd said something about work projects, but I never saw her buried in spreadsheets or company emails that made any sense. Mostly, I saw her tapping away at text. "Sure," I said, forcing a small smile. "We'll just swing by, won't take long." She nodded absently, already back to her phone. I resisted the urge to ask what was so important at 9 a.m. on a Saturday. Instead, I drank my coffee in silence. The only sound was the soft hum of the furnace kicking on, pushing warm air through the vents as I stood a few feet from my wife, who seemed a million miles away. By the time we reached the Christmas market around midday, a cold drizzle had begun to fall. The market was held in the town square every year. Bright tents, twinkling lights, and vendors selling handmade crafts, candies, and ornaments. Normally, we'd stroll hand in hand, sipping hot cider and admiring the artistry. I'd point out a whimsical snowflake ornament, and she'd find a delicate blown glass Santa. We'd laugh, negotiate with the vendor, and leave feeling like we'd found something uniquely ours. This time, Laura walked slightly ahead, one hand in her coat pocket, the other clutching her phone. The vendors called out cheerful greetings, "Merry Christmas," and I responded with nods and smiles, while she barely acknowledged them. When we reached the section with ornaments, I paused by a booth displaying intricately carved wooden pieces. Reindeer, snowmen, stars, all lovingly sanded and painted. It felt like a place we might find something meaningful. "Look at these," I said, picking up a small hand-carved star painted in pale gold, its edges outlined in red and green. "It reminds me of the one we got the year we visited your parents' cabin." She glanced up briefly. "Nice," she said, voice flat. Then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed. She stepped aside, holding the device close to her face as if to shield it from my view. She typed something quickly, then slipped it back into her pocket. I tried another approach. "What about something more modern?" I pointed to a booth selling stained glass ornaments in rich blues and greens. They caught the soft light, turning it into vibrant shards of color. "We don't have anything like that on the tree yet." Laura turned her head, gave a perfunctory nod, and then moved a few steps away as if bored. My chest tightened. Her indifference stung more than I'd expected. This was supposed to be our time, our ritual. The sense of loss welled in me. I took a deep breath and forced calmness. Maybe I should just pick an ornament myself. I drifted from booth to booth, occasionally trying to engage her. "What do you think of this one?" Or, "Check out how detailed this is." Each time, she gave the minimum response, eyes sliding to her phone as soon as she could politely disengage. After about 10 minutes, I stepped up to a craftsman who specialized in carved wood ornaments. He was an older gentleman with kind eyes and a thick gray mustache. He greeted me warmly and asked, "Looking for something special?" "Yeah," I said quietly, "something unique, something that feels like it belongs on our tree." But as I said it, I glanced over at Laura. She stood a few feet away, facing away from me, shoulders hunched slightly, phone once again in hand. She looked as if she'd rather be anywhere else. The craftsman followed my gaze and gave me a sympathetic smile. "Holiday stress?" he asked gently, keeping his voice low and kind. I managed a half smile, something like that. He picked up a small wooden ornament, a heart-shaped piece etched with intricate swirls and accented with a single sprig of holly painted near the top. "This one's popular with couples," he said. "I always tell people it's for those who want to remember love in the midst of winter." My throat tightened. Remember love. I accepted the ornament and turned it over in my hands. It was beautiful and delicate. A year ago, I would have picked this out immediately, shown it to Laura, and we'd have bought it without hesitation. Now, I wasn't sure what the point would be. Still, I purchased it, thanking the craftsman as he slipped it into a small paper bag. I turned to Laura, who must have noticed the transaction because she put her phone away and walked towards me. "Got something?" she asked. "Yeah," I said quietly. "It's nice." She nodded, not even asking to see it. "Great, can we go now?" "We just got here," I protested softly. The market's atmosphere was cheerful. Children laughing, carols playing softly from a nearby speaker, the smell of roasted chestnuts and spiced cider filling the air. It used to be a place where we lingered for hours, but she gave me a look that said she didn't want to linger. Something else, or someone else, demanded her time. The ride home was silent, except for the low hum of the car's heater. I tried starting a conversation a couple of times, asked if we should consider any new recipes for Christmas dinner, or if she wanted to invite a couple of neighbors over for a small gathering. She shrugged at each suggestion, then focused on some article on her phone. Eventually, I gave up, focusing on the road and the gentle sweep of the windshield wipers. Back at the house, I placed the ornament under the tree's branches near the front. The heart shape and holly sprig caught the glow of the lights. I stood there for a moment, recalling how we'd once debated placement of each ornament as if it were a crucial artistic decision. Now I decorated alone. Laura had retreated upstairs, citing a need to finish something for work. I heard muffled voices, hers low and urgent, through the closed bedroom door. A phone call, perhaps? I made cookies in the kitchen, a new recipe I discovered online. Cinnamon sugar cookies shaped like snowflakes. As I rolled out the dough, I remembered how she used to stand beside me, flour smudging her chin, telling funny stories about her coworkers or family traditions. I would pass her cookie cutters, she'd press them carefully into the dough. Together, we'd laugh at misshapen cookies or debate if the icing was too thick. This year, the laughter had evaporated. When the cookies were done, I arranged them on a plate and carried them upstairs, hoping to coax her into a moment of shared delight. I knocked gently on the door. After a pause, she opened it a crack, stepped into the hallway, and closed the door behind her. I caught a glimpse of the bedroom inside, her laptop on the bed, phone plugged into the charger, no sign of work documents, just personal devices glowing in the lamplight. "Cookies," I said, holding out the plate. "They're cinnamon sugar, shaped like snowflakes. Thought we could taste test them together." She forced a small smile. "Maybe later, okay? I'm really swamped." She took one cookie and bit into it. She said vaguely. "It's good." Then, with a nod that signaled dismissal, she slipped back into the room and shut the door. I stood there in the hallway, holding a plate of cookies meant for two. In the quiet, I wondered what had gone so wrong. If it was just stress, why not talk to me? Why not let me help? If it was something else, something more personal or painful, why was she shutting me out? I returned to the living room, placing the cookies on the coffee table. I turned on a Christmas movie, something lighthearted I knew she liked. In past years, she'd curl up next to me on the couch. We'd comment on the cheesy dialogue, enjoy the familiar plot. This time, I watched alone. Occasionally, I'd glance towards the stairs, half hoping to see her come down and join me, but she never did. The movie's laughter and bright colors felt hollow without her. The tree's soft glow felt like a lie, pretending warmth where there was none. The heart ornament I'd bought at the market caught my eye. It swung gently on its branch as if mocking me. Remember love. How could I forget it when its absence was so glaring? As evening fell, I tried once more to draw her out. I climbed the stairs and lightly knocked on the door. No answer. I waited, then knocked again. After a pause, I heard her voice. "What is it?" She sounded annoyed. "Just checking if you want dinner," I said softly. A sigh. "I'm not hungry. I'll eat later." I swallowed hard. "Sure," I managed, my voice steady but hollow. I retreated downstairs, once again leaving her to her secrets. In the silent living room, I thought about all the little traditions we'd broken this year. We hadn't baked cookies together, or picked the ornament as a team, or fully decorated the tree side by side. She hadn't cared where I placed the angel topper, and when I hung stockings earlier in the week, she barely looked up from her phone. Every small act that once brought us closer now felt like a lonely endeavor. I told myself maybe next weekend would be better. Maybe once the holiday rush at her job ended, she'd come back to me. But even as I thought it, I didn't believe it. Deep inside, I suspected something more sinister than work stress or seasonal fatigue. Her phone's constant presence, her secretive smiles, her eagerness to leave my company, these hinted at a reality I didn't want to face. I wouldn't force a confrontation yet. I would watch, listen, gather clues. If something was truly wrong, if she was betraying our vows and turning this season of joy into a sham, I needed proof. Until I had it, I had to endure the pain of these broken traditions and hope that, at some point, the truth would set me free. For now, I looked at the half-finished decorations, the lonely plate of cookies, and the heart-shaped ornament shining in the tree's glow. We were going through the motions of Christmas without the meaning, and I wondered if I would ever again see her place an ornament on the tree with genuine love, or if this, too, was a memory fading into the past. Chapter 3: The Discovery by Candlelight. A few more days slipped by in a haze of half-finished tasks and one-sided holiday preparations. The week before Christmas had arrived, yet the house still didn't feel like it should. The living room was partially decorated, the cookies baked in lonely batches, and the music I played each evening met with silence from upstairs. Laura's mood didn't improve. In fact, if anything, she seemed more distant than before. She came home late twice in a row, citing vague work crises that made no sense given the slow season at her company. I tried to confront her gently once more. It was Thursday evening, and I'd poured 2 glasses of mulled wine, hoping the familiar aroma might soften the tension. She entered the house around 8, shrugged off her coat, and headed straight for the kitchen where I waited. "Hey," I said, holding out a glass. "Thought we could relax for a minute. Maybe talk about the holiday dinner menu or something. Your parents will be here soon, and mine too." She paused, looked at the wine, then at me. For a second, I thought I saw guilt flicker behind her eyes. She took the glass but didn't drink. "I'm really beat," she said. "I had a long day. Can we do this tomorrow?" I forced a smile. "Sure. I feel like we haven't caught up in a while. Everything okay?" The question hung in the air. She sighed. "I'm just overwhelmed, end of year stuff at work. You know, we'll talk later." Without further explanation, she slipped into the next room, and soon after, upstairs. I listened as her footsteps padded lightly above me, then the soft click of the bedroom door. I stood there, untouched wine in my hand, trying to quell the suspicion that gnawed at me. Something about her excuses and her body language, this guarded, distant quality, pushed me towards a darker conclusion. It was more than holiday stress, more than a few long hours at the office. I'd given her space, tried kindness, offered moments of connection, and all were rebuffed. If she wasn't just stressed, what else could explain her secrecy and her strange relationship with her phone? I had to know. The uncertainty was worse than any truth I could imagine. At least, that's what I told myself. If she was having an affair, I needed to confirm it. If she wasn't, and I was simply paranoid, then the evidence would put my mind at ease. But I doubted I'd find reassurance. Every subtle clue pointed towards a betrayal that I could no longer ignore. The next evening, the opportunity presented itself. Laura left her phone charging on the nightstand and went to take a long shower before bed. I lay in bed, feigning sleep, heart pounding. A sliver of light from the bathroom door cast a thin glow across the carpet. I waited until I heard the steady rush of water in the shower, then counted to 100 in my head to be sure she was well occupied. I rose quietly, careful not to make the bed creak. Her phone lay face down plugged in. I flipped it over. A lock screen. Of course. My heart sank. She'd started using a passcode, but we'd always known each other's codes for convenience. She'd never changed it before. Would it still be the same? Fingers trembling slightly, I typed in the old 4-digit code, my birth month and day. To my astonishment and relief, it unlocked. She must not have thought I'd ever check. Perhaps she grew careless or overconfident. My chest tightened as the home screen opened. Notifications hovered there. A few missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. Several texts from D-Marketing. My pulse quickened. D-Marketing? She mentioned a Daniel at work once, some HR guy who oversaw certain processes. Could that be him? Why was he contacting her at this hour? The text read, D-Marketing, 9:47 p.m. Got your message. Can't wait until Monday, smiley face. D-Marketing, 9:50 p.m. That last pic made my night. You're stunning. D-Marketing, 9:55 p.m. Don't forget to delete these, laugh out loud. A knot formed in my throat. I glanced towards the bathroom door. The water still ran. I had a few minutes, maybe less. I tapped on the thread. A stream of messages revealed itself. Too many to read in full, but enough to see their tone. Compliments, flirtations, explicit hints. My stomach churned as I skimmed the conversation. It went back months. They talked about the times I thought she was working late, the quick meetups at the downtown hotel bar, the short weekend business trips that were really getaways for them to be together. They mocked my cluelessness once or twice, laughing at how I believed her excuses. My hand shook with rage and humiliation. I saw references to holiday events I'd planned. She'd use them as cover stories, telling him she couldn't meet on certain nights because I wanted to bake cookies or go to the market. But the tone suggested she resented those moments with me, as if I were an obstacle. Nausea rose in my chest. I forced it down. I had to gather evidence. Quickly, I snapped photos of the screen with my own phone, capturing key messages, dates, places mentioned. Then I clicked on the small media icon for the thread. There were photos, some of Laura smiling intimately at the camera in what looked like a hotel room, maybe leaning against a pillow. Nothing too explicit, but intimate enough to confirm they were more than colleagues. Another shot showed them together, her head on his shoulder, a fireplace flickering behind them. I recognized that fireplace from a boutique inn about an hour away. She once told me she had a team retreat there. I fought the urge to fling her phone against the wall. Instead, I carefully backed out of the conversation, locked the phone, and placed it exactly as I'd found it. Then I returned to bed, heart pounding so loudly I feared she'd hear it over the shower. By the time she emerged from the bathroom, I had thrown an arm over my face, feigning sleep, breathing slowly and evenly. My mind raced. I had my answer. She was cheating on me. My wife of 8 years, the woman who promised to share a life of trust and love, was lying straight to my face while playing holiday charades. It was no wonder she resisted all our traditions this year. They probably reminded her of the life she was betraying. Or maybe she simply cared more about texting her lover than trimming a tree with her husband. She climbed into bed carefully as if not to wake me. If she only knew I was wide awake, fury and pain thrumming through my veins. That night, I barely slept. Instead, I stared at the darkness behind closed eyelids, replaying the messages in my head, each one a fresh wound. The next day, I thought about confronting her immediately. The idea of tossing the phone in front of her and demanding answers lured me. I imagined her stammering denials, watching her face crumble under the weight of undeniable proof. But then I remembered what confrontation without planning would cost me. A hasty showdown might give her time to cover her tracks, muddy the narrative, spin lies to family and friends. If I wanted justice, true, undeniable justice, I needed to be patient and methodical. This realization shaped a cruel resolve inside me. She had broken our marriage vows. She had played me for a fool, texting her lover from our home while ignoring our traditions and treating attempts at closeness like annoyances. Now I would respond in kind, not with violence or screaming, but with precision. I would gather more evidence, consult a lawyer, and plan a revelation so thorough and humiliating she'd never recover her spotless image. My mind turned toward Christmas Day. We were set to host both sets of parents. Everyone loved the idea. My parents and hers got along well, and it was a cherished tradition. What if, instead of a cozy family gathering, Christmas became the stage for the truth? The idea sent a dark thrill through me. It would be terrible, a nuclear strike on her carefully constructed facade. But wasn't that what she deserved for turning what should be a season of love and unity into a sham? I kept my emotions contained. Over the next couple of days, I played my part as the clueless, supportive husband. I asked if she needed help wrapping gifts. She said no. I suggested watching our favorite Christmas movie. We'd always watched It's a Wonderful Life together as the holiday approached. She shrugged it off and said maybe later. Each time she avoided me, I mentally added another log to the fire of my resolve. In quiet moments, I reviewed the screenshots I'd taken. I also made copies, saving them to a hidden folder on my cloud storage and printing some out at my office printer late at night. I envisioned placing these printouts in a neatly wrapped box under the tree, labeled with her name. I imagined her opening that box in front of everyone, expecting jewelry or a sentimental token, only to find her own treachery laid bare. But I needed more than messages. I wanted incontrovertible evidence, things that no one could dispute. In my state, proof of adultery could influence divorce settlements. I wanted her to see how it felt to be cornered, with no escape. So I contacted a private investigator. It felt surreal, like something out of a noir film. I found a reputable one online, called from my car, and arranged for them to follow Laura discreetly. With luck, they'd snap pictures confirming her late-night work sessions were actually illicit rendezvous. At home, I spoke less to Laura. I pretended busyness, a mild sadness I didn't bother to explain. She barely noticed. If anything, my muted presence probably made her double down on her phone's glow, seeking excitement there instead of the awkward silence in our home. She came and went, offered vague excuses, all while I stacked the layers of evidence. One evening, I watched her from the corner of my eye. She lounged on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through messages and smiling softly. The Christmas tree lights twinkled, reflecting in her eyes, but their warm color was wasted. The tree might as well have been a prop in a play, our life stage now reduced to pretense and deceit. I clenched my jaw and reminded myself, patience. Soon she would understand what betrayal costs. My heart ached too. Despite my anger, I couldn't deny the pain of losing someone I once loved so deeply. Seeing those messages and photos had shattered a cherished bond. Yet the wound only hardened my resolve. She'd chosen this path, not I. She'd turned our holiday season into a masquerade of lies. The least I could do was ensure that when the truth came out, it came out big. And so I waited. Each day brought us closer to Christmas, closer to the moment I planned to expose her infidelity in front of the people she cared about the most, her parents and my parents. I would do it calmly, letting the evidence speak louder than any accusation. Let her try to deny it while flipping through the pages of her own text messages printed in full color. Let her family see who she really was. Lying in bed that night, I stared at the ceiling again, remembering how just a year ago we'd fallen asleep holding hands after a day of decorating and drinking hot chocolate. Now, she turned away from me, phone on her nightstand, screen occasionally lighting up with new messages. She thought she was safe and undiscovered, free to continue her double life. But I knew better. I knew the truth, and soon, so would everyone else. Chapter 4: Gathering Ammunition. A biting wind rattled the window panes the following morning as I sat alone in my car, parked in a quiet lot a few miles from home. The sky hung low with heavy clouds, hinting at snow. It was early, too early for any holiday shoppers or cafe patrons to be out and about. I leaned back against the driver's seat, phone pressed to my ear, my fingers tapping nervously against the steering wheel. A calm, measured voice answered on the second ring. "Good morning, this is Kelsey Chen's office." Kelsey Chen was a family lawyer recommended by a friend I trusted. He had said, if you ever need someone who's meticulous and absolutely unflinching, she's your best bet. At the time, I never thought I'd actually call, but here I was, days before Christmas, making an appointment to discuss the nuclear fallout of my marriage. "Hi," I said quietly. "I'd like to schedule a consultation, something urgent." The receptionist took my details and found a slot for me that afternoon. Perfect. I hung up and exhaled. Just making the call felt like stepping through a door I could never close again. I was no longer just a victim of Laura's lies. I was preparing to fight back. With each step, the numbness in my chest gave way to a fierce, cold resolve. After the call, I opened my phone's gallery and reviewed the screenshots I'd taken of Laura's text messages with her affair partner. I'd created a hidden folder and uploaded copies to the cloud, labeling them by date. I also had the PI's number saved. We'd arranged that he would tail Laura the next time she claimed to be working late. I couldn't be sure when that would happen, but lately, she'd found excuses almost every other night. The PI's rate wasn't cheap, but I considered it an investment. Adultery laws in our state wouldn't necessarily give me everything, but with enough evidence, I could ensure a swift and favorable divorce settlement. More importantly, I could present an airtight case in front of both families on Christmas Day, leaving no room for her to twist the story. The thought of that looming day made my stomach churn. This wouldn't be just a quiet separation. It would be a public reckoning. I'd chosen Christmas because we'd planned to host dinner for both sets of parents. They were expecting a warm holiday gathering, not an explosion of betrayal and heartbreak. But I couldn't muster sympathy anymore. After all, Laura had chosen this path, and I deserved some measure of justice. I started the engine and pulled onto the main road. The drive to the lawyer's office was uneventful, just a slow procession of thoughts weighed down by a gray December sky. I kept replaying Laura's dismissive shrugs, her guarded phone, her half-hearted involvement in holiday traditions. Those memories now had context. She was too busy thinking about him, Daniel, I presumed, to care about the life we'd built. At Kelsey Chen's office, I sat in a sleek, modern waiting room decorated with tasteful abstract paintings. A small Christmas tree twinkled in the corner, and a bowl of wrapped chocolates offered a weak nod to the season. The receptionist smiled politely as I pretended to flip through a magazine. I felt detached, as if watching my own life from a distance. A part of me wanted to cry, or maybe rage, but I'd tamped down those emotions, storing them away until my plan could unfold. Kelsey greeted me personally and led me into her office. Professional, minimalistic, with shelves of law books and a glass desk. She was in her 40s, hair neatly pulled back, wearing a charcoal suit. Her expression was calm but attentive. When she gestured for me to sit, I felt a surprising wave of relief. I was in the hands of a professional now. "How can I help you?" she asked, voice steady, as if discussing nothing more emotional than a contract negotiation. I took a breath, then told her everything. I started with the changes in Laura's behavior, the late nights, the phone obsession, the holiday traditions left half done. I described finding the texts and photos, my suspicions confirmed beyond doubt. I explained I wanted a divorce, and I wanted it on my terms. Most of all, I wanted to expose her lies publicly so that no one could paint me as the villain. Kelsey listened without interrupting. Only after I finished did she lean forward, hands folded, and asked, "You mentioned you have documentation. Can I see it?" I handed her my phone, showing her the folder of screenshots and the notes I'd compiled. Timestamps, dates she claimed to be somewhere else. She flipped through them, her face impassive. After a few minutes, she nodded. "This is substantial," she said quietly. "And you say you have a private investigator on standby?" I confirmed it. She liked that idea, calling it corroboration for my claims. "The more documented evidence we have," she said, "the harder it is for her to argue in court. Also, if her affair partner is married, and you imply he might be, this could lead to complications on their side, but that's not your concern right now." We discussed the legalities. Even with proof, our state wasn't heavily punitive towards adultery, but it could influence the division of assets and expedite the divorce. Since we had no children, custody wasn't an issue. She advised me on steps to protect my finances, moving a portion of savings into a separate account, securing important personal assets, and preparing a quick filing the moment the holiday confrontation was over. I appreciated her straightforward manner. She didn't question my morality, didn't try to dissuade me from the public reveal. In fact, she asked if I wanted to consider alternatives. I shook my head. I needed the public exposure. Otherwise, Laura could gaslight our families, claim I was controlling or emotionally distant. This would be the cleanest cut, leaving no room for lies. Kelsey understood. Before I left, she promised to draft the initial divorce papers and have them ready for my review. "If you decide to pull the trigger right after Christmas, we can file immediately," she said. I left her office, feeling grim but determined. I had a plan now. Gather more evidence, protect my finances, deliver the blow on Christmas Day, and then file. Laura's betrayal would not go unanswered. That evening, Laura texted me around 7. She claimed she'd be working late again, something about a big meeting with overseas clients. I almost smiled at the convenience. I called the PI and arranged for him to follow her. By 7:45 p.m., he confirmed he was on her trail. I felt a strange calm set in. Soon, I'd have photos of her going to that hotel or wherever they met, concrete visuals to back up the text. At home, I kept the lights low, heated up leftovers, and tried to distract myself by wrapping gifts for my parents. My mother loved handmade scarves. I'd found a beautiful wool one I knew she'd cherish. I felt a pang of sadness as I wrapped it. The holidays once meant something so pure, a time to show love and gratitude. Now, they would become a minefield of secrets laid bare. Around 10 p.m., my phone buzzed. The PI texted, "Got them entering Hotel G at 9:30. Room booked under AP's name. We'll send photos shortly." I stared at the message, heart pounding. Hotel G was a boutique place downtown. All warm fireplaces and rustic charm. We'd stayed there once on our anniversary. The memory curdled in my mind. I waited a few minutes and photos arrived. Grainy, but clear enough to identify Laura and a tall, well-dressed man walking hand in hand into the lobby. Another photo showed them chatting with the receptionist, smiling easily as if they hadn't a care in the world. I saved them, backing them up just like I did with the text. Now I had everything. Timestamps, locations, images. Laura's attempts at secrecy were undone by her arrogance. She truly believed I'd never check. She didn't even bother to pick a different hotel. When she finally came home after midnight, I was in the living room reading. She must have been surprised to see me still awake. She looked flushed, her hair slightly disheveled, her posture tense. "You're up late," she said, taking off her coat and avoiding my eyes. "Yeah," I said calmly, marking my place in the book. "Just couldn't sleep." She crossed the room, kissed me lightly on the forehead, a gesture that felt forced and hollow. I managed a small smile. If only she knew what lay ahead. She went upstairs to shower and get ready for bed. I listened to her footsteps, picturing the evidence I'd collected. I tried to recall if I'd done anything to deserve this. Had I failed her somehow? We had our ups and downs like any couple, but nothing that justified such deceit. Regardless, that was behind me. The future would be one where I controlled the narrative. I had the lawyer, the PI's photos, the text message prints. Soon, I'd assemble it all into a neat package. I'd even gift wrap it. Her special Christmas present, perhaps with a bow, and a simple note, "Merry Christmas, Laura." The image of her face when she opened that box filled my mind. The shock, the shame, the scrambling for excuses in front of her parents and mine. It would hurt everyone in the room, of course, but I no longer cared. Better to have it all explode at once than let her drip feed lies into my life for months or years to come. I turned off the living room lights and climbed the stairs. The air smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon, a deceptive holiday warmth. I paused at the bedroom door, hearing her move about inside. Soon, she turned off the lamp, plunging the room into darkness. I slipped in quietly, feeling my way to the bed, and lay down, careful to keep my distance. She might mistake my silence for exhaustion, but truly, I was just conserving energy. The real show would begin soon enough. As I closed my eyes, I thought about how I would present the evidence on Christmas Day. Perhaps I'd have everyone open their presents first, let them enjoy a brief moment of normalcy, then hand Laura her box last. Let her think it's something special, something intimate. Then watch as the color drained from her face and the silence pressed in, heavy and unforgiving. I'd say nothing at first, just let them all see the dates, the photos, the text that coincided with times she claimed to be at work. If she tried to deny, I'd produce more pages, each one a hammer blow to her credibility. By the time I finished, no one would doubt my story. The divorce papers would follow in quick succession, and I would walk away from the wreckage she'd created. This was the path I'd chosen, not the path I wanted, but the one forced upon me by her betrayal. I would gather my ammunition, line it up neatly, and strike with devastating precision. And when it was over, I'd be free of her lies, her secret messages, her hollow participation in a holiday she no longer respected. I drifted into a restless sleep, the outlines of my plan etched clearly in my mind. Let Christmas come. Let it all come down like a thunderbolt. I was ready. Chapter 5: The Mask of Normalcy. December's chill deepened as the days crawled closer to Christmas. Snow flurries dusted the neighborhood on and off, never quite sticking, but leaving a thin, lacy pattern on the window panes. I rose early each morning, stepping out onto the porch with a mug of coffee to watch the sky lighten. The world looked calm, almost peaceful, deceptive appearances, given the storm I was preparing inside my home. If Laura noticed anything strange in my demeanor, she didn't show it. In fact, as I began to make my behavior even more accommodating, she seemed to relax. I stopped asking pointed questions and ceased my attempts to engage her in holiday activities. I played the part of the weary but understanding husband who'd given up on pushing too hard. "Go ahead," I said one evening when she mentioned another work dinner, waving a hand as if I didn't mind. "I know you're busy." I even offered to drop her off downtown one afternoon when she claimed she needed to shop for gifts. She declined the ride, of course, probably suspecting it might limit her freedom. But the fact that I offered, without a hint of suspicion in my voice, seemed to reassure her. Inside, I ground my teeth each time she grabbed her coat and left with some flimsy excuse. My private investigator kept me updated. Another set of photos arrived, her car parked behind a charming little bistro known for its romantic ambiance, the two of them leaving arm in arm, smiling like giddy teenagers. I saved every image, adding them to the growing folder. It was astonishing how bold she was, carrying on publicly, trusting me to remain oblivious. Her arrogance would be her downfall. By this point, I had assembled a thorough dossier. On my laptop, hidden behind layers of password protection, I cataloged every piece of evidence, screenshots of texts, photos from the PI, receipts I managed to pull from our joint credit card statements, showing charges at odd times and places. I cross-referenced dates and times against her claims. "I'm staying late at the office," or "I need to pick up something special at the mall," to form a damning timeline. Once compiled, it painted a picture of a double life, meticulously documented. At night, while Laura showered or disappeared into the guest room with her phone, I'd print out the evidence in crisp color prints. In our home office's locked drawer, I stored them in a sturdy folder. Each page felt like a weapon, honed to slice through her denials. One day soon, these pages would become part of her special Christmas gift. The legal side was progressing too. My lawyer, Kelsey, had emailed me draft divorce papers. She advised me on the precise wording to use, ensuring we leveraged every piece of evidence. I read the documents over carefully, noting how they detailed infidelity and dishonest conduct. Once I served them, Laura would have little room to negotiate a favorable split. The house, certain investments, and personal assets would largely remain mine. It was a bitter comfort. I didn't care about the money as much as I cared about making sure the truth came out cleanly. But I wouldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing she wouldn't profit from her deceit. During the evenings when Laura was actually home, I began mentioning Christmas logistics in a neutral, almost cheerful tone. I had to maintain the illusion that I still believed in our holiday plans. One night, as she scrolled through her phone on the couch, I sat at the dining table, pen in hand, scribbling a grocery list. "Your parents will be here on Christmas Eve, right?" I asked lightly, as if we were just another happy couple finalizing holiday menus. "I'm thinking of a roast, and maybe that cranberry walnut stuffing your mom loves." She glanced up, caught off guard. Yeah, I think so," she said, a bit distracted. "And your parents are still coming, right?" "They are," I affirmed, forcing a small smile. "They called yesterday. They're excited. Said they miss us both. I told them we'd make this year special." Laura gave a non-committal nod. If she felt guilty about the lie she was living, she didn't show it. More likely, she assumed I was just going through the motions, ignorant of her secret. That was fine. The more secure she felt, the more dramatic the final reveal would be. I continued, "I'm planning on serving dinner around 5 on Christmas Day. After that, we'll exchange gifts by the tree. I'm saving your present for last. Got something really special in mind." My voice didn't waver as I said this, and I watched closely for her reaction. She blinked, a moment's curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Oh," she said, "what is it?" I shrugged casually, careful not to overplay my hand. Can't spoil the surprise, but I think it will be memorable. If she picked up on any hidden meaning, she didn't let it show. Instead, she just gave a small, tight-lipped smile, as if she couldn't summon genuine enthusiasm. "I'm sure it will," she said. Then, as if relieved to end the conversation, she went back to typing something on her phone. I learned to cherish these moments of subtle foreshadowing. Each hint I dropped would increase the tension on Christmas Day, when she realized just how meticulously I'd set her up. It felt cruel, but then again, cheating on me and gaslighting me over the holidays wasn't exactly kind on her part. On another evening, I encouraged her to take as much time as she needed for holiday shopping. She hesitated, maybe suspecting a trap, but I smiled softly and said, "I know you've got a lot on your plate, don't worry about me. I'll handle the final touches around the house." I gestured at the half-decorated mantle, where stockings hung crookedly, and the garland needed arranging. "I want everything to be perfect for when our families arrive." This seemed to put her at ease. She nodded, looking almost grateful. "Thanks," she said, slipping her phone into her purse. "I'll be back in a couple of hours." The PI confirmed later that she didn't go near any mall. Instead, she met Daniel at a cozy wine bar on the outskirts of town. The PI snapped photos of them laughing, leaning close, their heads nearly touching over candlelight. Another item for my collection, another nail in the coffin of her false narrative. I kept playing my role as the detached but cooperative husband. I stopped initiating any romantic gestures. We hadn't shared more than a peck on the cheek in weeks, and she didn't complain. The silence between us lengthened, yet on the surface, I presented no challenge to her freedom. This lullaby of normalcy lulled her into complacency. She must have thought that my initial attempts to engage her in holiday traditions had fizzled, and that I'd settled into acceptance of her distant mood. As Christmas approached, the neighborhood came fully alive with lights and decorations. Our home looked beautiful too, if one ignored the tension within. I finished hanging ornaments on the tree, rearranged the stockings, and set up a small nativity scene on the coffee table. I even placed a bowl of scented pine cones on the mantle, recalling how much Laura once loved that rustic aroma. She barely commented on any of it. Sometimes, while lighting the tree in the evening, I'd imagine how different this holiday could have been. I remembered past Decembers, the laughter, the shared excitement, the silly dancing to carols when we thought no one was watching. All gone now, replaced by a silent war of secrets and impending confrontation. As part of me mourned what we'd lost, another part hardened, remembering the messages I'd read, the photos I'd seen, and the cruelty of her dishonesty. On the financial front, I quietly opened a separate bank account as advised by Kelsey. I transferred a portion of our joint savings there, ensuring I had resources protected. I scanned important documents, house deeds, investment summaries, and stored them off-site. If Laura tried any trickery after the reveal, she'd find I anticipated it. The night before Christmas Eve, I stood in the study, the door locked. Laura had gone to bed early, complaining of a headache. On the desk lay a simple wooden box I'd found in a craft store. It was plain, but I planned to wrap it elegantly, tying a bright red ribbon around it. Inside would go the printed pages of her text messages and photos, arranged in a neat sequence. First, a copy of a loving anniversary card she once wrote to me to remind her and everyone else of what our marriage was supposed to mean. Then, the carefully dated texts and photos that showed her progression from mild flirtation to full-blown infidelity. I thumbed through the pages, making sure they were in order. The evidence told a story, a happy marriage tarnished by secret rendezvous, holiday traditions replaced by hotel stays, and bar visits with another man. It was a narrative so stark and undeniable that when read through, it removed all ambiguity. No one would blame me after seeing this. No one would call me paranoid or controlling. I also tucked in an envelope, on the top saying Merry Christmas, Laura. Just that, in simple black ink. I wrote another message on a paper, folded it, and inserted it inside. It felt symbolic. This was, after all, a gift of truth. I closed the box and imagined the scene. Our families gathered around, her parents anticipating a warm, loving exchange of presents. My parents eager to see my in-laws and celebrate as one big happy family. And then Laura, unsuspecting, opening her gift and finding the truth laid bare. Yes, it would be devastating. Yes, everyone would be hurt, but I would not be the one who caused the original harm. She had done that, and now I was simply pulling back the curtain. After ensuring the evidence was safely hidden away, I turned off the desk lamp and slipped into the hallway. The house was quiet, only the soft hum of the furnace and the faint scent of pine in the air. I passed the living room, where the tree stood in gentle darkness, ornaments catching the faint glow from the streetlights outside. A beautiful scene, a lie of peace and harmony. I climbed the stairs and entered the bedroom softly. Laura was asleep or pretending to be. I didn't bother to check. I lay on my side of the bed, closed my eyes, and told myself, just a little longer. I had maintained the mask of normalcy long enough to gather overwhelming evidence, secure my legal position, and guarantee a spectacular reveal. Now, I only needed to wait a few more days until Christmas. Soon, the charade would end. Soon, all this careful normalcy would shatter, replaced by the cold, hard truth of what she had done. And as I drifted into a fitful sleep, I knew that when the time came, I would feel no remorse. I would be calm, steady, and prepared, just as I had been since the moment I discovered her betrayal. The mask might have been stifling, but wearing it has served its purpose, and I would remove it at exactly the right moment. Chapter 6: Christmas Eve Shadows. Christmas Eve dawned gray and quiet, a thin veil of cloud dimming the winter sun. Overnight, a light dusting of snow had softened the neighborhood's outlines. From our bedroom window, I watched as early risers scraped frost from windshields and carried wrapped packages to their cars. Everywhere, people hurried to complete last-minute errands, all part of the holiday rush. Inside our home, the hush was tense, expectant. Laura woke late, emerging from the bedroom around 9 with a subdued "good morning." I offered coffee and a plate of sugar cookies I'd baked the night before, another tradition I used to look forward to sharing. She took one sip, set the cup down, and said she had a lot to do before our families arrived tomorrow. I nodded amiably, not pressing for details. My mask of normalcy remained firmly in place. The truth was, all the hard work on my end was done. I spent the morning focusing on the household tasks that would make tomorrow appear perfectly ordinary. I vacuumed the living room rug, straightened the throw pillows, and checked that the spare blankets for our parents, both sets expected tomorrow, were neatly folded in the guest rooms. I prepped some of the ingredients for our holiday dinner, chopping herbs and measuring out spices, sealing them in small containers for easy use the next day. Every ordinary action felt surreal now, as if I were an actor performing a domestic scene right before the climax of a play. Laura drifted around the house, paying minimal attention to my efforts. When I asked if she wanted to pick up fresh flowers for the table, she declined with a vaguely distracted look, then slipped upstairs to wrap gifts. I let her go without comment, wondering if she would text him, the man she'd chosen over her marriage, while I arranged centerpieces and placed festive candles on the mantel. The illusion of a normal holiday pressed upon me from all sides. Around midday, I went out to run a few small errands of my own, purely for show. I drove to the florist and bought a bouquet of winter roses, something elegant for the dining room table. The florist, a cheerful older woman, complimented me on my choice and wished me a Merry Christmas. I thanked her, my stomach twisting at the irony. Tomorrow's events would be anything but merry, at least not in the traditional sense. On my way back, I stopped by a quiet park near the outskirts of town. The air was crisp, and I could smell wood smoke drifting from distant chimneys. I sat on a bench overlooking a frozen pond, letting the stillness seep into me. In a few hours, I would place the box under the tree. 24 hours after that, the truth would explode in front of our families. For a moment, I allowed myself a flicker of doubt. Was I doing the right thing? I pictured Laura's parents kind and unsuspecting. My parents excited to spend the holiday with my in-laws, all of them thinking we were a happy couple hosting a warm family gathering. They would be caught in the blast radius of this revelation. But then I reminded myself that Laura's choices had already planted the bomb. I was merely unveiling it. If I confronted her privately, she could lie or manipulate the story behind my back. Public exposure was the only way to ensure the truth stood naked and undeniable. Steeling myself, I returned home. The house was quiet. Laura must have been upstairs. I set the winter roses in a vase on the dining table, adjusted their stems until they draped just right. The soft red petals and evergreen sprigs looked perfect against the cream tablecloth. I tested the table's centerpiece arrangement, placing a few white candles beside the vase, and stepped back. It looked like a scene from a holiday magazine, the kind of refined setup any host would be proud of. By late afternoon, Laura reappeared, carrying a few wrapped parcels and tucking them under the tree. I watched her from the doorway of the dining room, noting the tension in her posture. She placed the gifts with mechanical precision, then glanced towards the stairs, as if itching to return to her phone the moment I wasn't watching. I pretended to busy myself with straightening a framed family photo on the sideboard. In it, Laura and I were smiling, arms around each other, wearing sweaters and holding mugs of cocoa. A winter memory from years back. How far we'd come from that simple happiness. "Everything looks nice," she said abruptly, catching me off guard. I turned and saw her looking around at the decorations. Stockings on the mantel, the tree lit softly in the corner, the subtle scent of cinnamon and pine in the air. Her tone was careful, as if testing the waters of conversation. "Thanks," I replied evenly. "I wanted tomorrow to be special for everyone." She nodded and smoothed the hand over her hair. "I'm sure it will be." Her voice held a note I couldn't quite place. Uncertainty? Guilt? It didn't matter. Whatever she felt now wouldn't stop me. Evening descended, the sky turning a deep blue as the last light faded. I reheated leftover soup for dinner and offered her some. She said she'd eat later, citing a headache once more. I didn't push, let her think I'd accepted all her flimsy excuses. I ate alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair where she might have joined me if things were different. I couldn't deny a hollow ache in my chest. Part of me longed for the way we used to be, but that part had been betrayed too many times to protest now. After dinner, I found her dozing on the couch, the TV on low volume. A mindless holiday special played, candy cane dances, elves, cheerful songs, while her eyes remained half-lidded. I kept my distance. Soon, I told myself, soon I'd head upstairs, retrieve the wooden box from its hiding place, and slip it under the tree. She'd likely go to bed before midnight, giving me the perfect window to act. The idea of placing that box among the other gifts sent a jolt of adrenaline through me, the moment of no return. As predicted around 10, she roused herself, mumbled something about being exhausted, and headed up to bed. Once again, I waited, giving her time to settle in, perhaps to scroll through her phone messages one last time before tomorrow's catastrophe. I tried not to think about what she might be saying to him at this late hour. It no longer mattered. By tomorrow evening, her secrets would be public record. Near midnight, I climbed the stairs quietly and entered the study. The wooden box waited in the drawer undisturbed. I unlocked it and lifted the box gently, feeling its weight, just paper and ink, but heavier in meaning than any gift I'd ever given her. Before leaving, I paused, letting memory wash over me. The study shelves held photo albums and souvenirs from trips we took. We once went skiing, laughing as we both toppled over in the snow. Another time, we visited a vineyard and pretended to be wine connoisseurs. Where had that joy gone? No answer came. The silence was thick, my breath steady. I carried the box downstairs and into the living room. The tree lights blinked softly, illuminating the pile of gifts she'd placed earlier. Sweaters for parents, a book for her father, a scarf for my mother. All normal, pleasant things. I crouched and gently nudged a few packages aside, making a space in the back for the wooden box. Just close enough so that when I handed it to her tomorrow, I could say, "Open yours last, I saved something special." I placed the box under the tree and straightened up. My heart thumped in my ears. This was it. I looked around at the quiet room one more time, absorbing every detail. The warm glow of the lights, the faint scent of pine, the hush of a house at peace. It was a peace built on illusions, soon to be shattered. I turned off all lights except the tree and a single lamp by the couch, creating a gentle twilight effect. Tomorrow, the families would arrive, we'd share a meal, exchange polite conversation, and then move into the living room for gifts. I could almost hear the laughter, imagine the clinking of glasses, and then I'd guide Laura to her present, watch her open that innocent-looking box, see the color drain from her face. In that moment, truth would flood the room. I made my way upstairs, my footsteps careful so as not to wake her. In the bedroom, she lay facing the wall, her back to my side of the bed. Her breathing was steady and even, but who knew if she truly slept? I slipped under the covers, keeping my distance. My mind raced through possible scenarios. What she might say, how her parents might react. Whatever happened, I was prepared. I had the evidence, the legal documents ready to file, and the moral high ground. Closing my eyes, I breathed slowly, willing myself to rest. Tomorrow would be long and emotionally draining, but I had waited this long, endured weeks of false cheer and silence. One more night of waiting wouldn't kill me. I focused on my breathing, counting each inhalation, letting the tension sink into my bones. By the time I drifted into a light, uneasy sleep, I had no regrets left. I had done everything I could. The stage was set, the cast assembled, and the props in place. Christmas Eve shadows stretched long behind me, and at tomorrow's dawn, the final act in this twisted holiday play would begin. Chapter 7: The Festive Veneer. Christmas Day dawned still and pale, the sky a muted canvas of winter light. I awoke to find Laura already out of bed, though I hadn't heard her stir. My heart thumped with nervous energy. Today was the day. I got dressed slowly, choosing a plain sweater and slacks. Nothing too formal, nothing too casual. Just the attire of a husband hosting a holiday gathering, hiding a carefully prepared bombshell under the Christmas tree. Downstairs, I found Laura in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a mug of coffee. She looked pensive, gaze drifting over the decorations as if searching for something to anchor her. A faint tension tightened her jaw. Perhaps she sensed something was off, or maybe she was just dreading the family affair after weeks of cool detachment. I poured myself a cup of coffee and offered a calm good morning. She nodded but didn't meet my eyes. Morning, she said softly. Need help with anything? I paused, surprised at her offer. Was she feeling guilty or just trying to play the attentive spouse now that our parents would soon arrive? I took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth steady me. I've got most of it under control, I replied. You could set the table later if you'd like. It was a small, harmless request, giving her something innocuous to do while I handled the bigger picture, the dinner, and later, the carefully planned gift exchange. She agreed with a quick nod and slipped into the dining room to retrieve placemats. On the surface, everything looked normal, a husband and wife preparing for a holiday meal. Anyone glancing in might see only two people checking tasks off a list, but I knew better. Underneath the pleasantries, a quiet war raged. She had no idea I'd caught her lies. I had no intention of letting her escape unscathed. Around midday, my parents arrived first, early as always. My mother carried a tin of homemade cookies and beamed as she stepped through the front door. My father following with a bottle of good wine. Laura emerged to greet them, embracing them both with a polite smile. I watched her closely for any flicker of shame or discomfort. If it was there, she hid it well. They admired the decorations, complimenting the subtle scent of pine candles. I left them chatting in the foyer and ducked into the kitchen to check on the roast. Each familiar action, basting the meat, stirring the cranberry sauce, reminded me I had a plan, and all I needed was to keep my composure. Before long, Laura's parents arrived, shaking snow from their coats. Her mother's eyes brightened at the cozy scene. Her father nodded approvingly at our neatly arranged living room. We exchanged warm hugs. I wondered what they would say when they learned the truth. My stomach tightened, but I gave them a steady smile and guided them all into the living room. The tree lights glowed softly. Beneath them lay a neat assortment of gifts. Among them, hidden in plain sight, was the wooden box I had placed last night. Inside was an envelope labeled simply, "Merry Christmas, Laura." She hadn't noticed it yet, and I had no reason to rush. The timing would be perfect. After dinner, after everyone was settled, I'd guide her to that last gift and let the truth unfold at my command. Laura drifted near the couch, chatting politely with her mother about how busy work has been. From the corner of my eye, I noted how easily she lied, how routine it must have become for her. I forced myself to remain calm, holding on to the knowledge that this would all end tonight. My father and Laura's father discussed sports. My mother and Laura's mother admired the ornaments on the tree. The atmosphere was exactly what anyone would expect from a family holiday gathering. I managed small talk, nodded at stories, offered refills of coffee and tea. Inside, I rehearsed how I'd maintain my poise later, when the revelation came. As afternoon gave way to early evening, I led everyone into the dining room for dinner. Laura had set the table nicely. Linen placemats, polished silverware, the winter roses I'd chosen as a centerpiece. The candles flickered softly, and I felt a pang at how perfect everything seemed, knowing I would soon smash this illusion. Dinner began smoothly: roast, glazed carrots, cranberry walnut stuffing, mashed potatoes. Everyone praised the meal. Laura complimented my cooking. Her mother agreed, and laughter rose over half-remembered family anecdotes. If I closed my eyes, I might have believed we were a happy family. But I didn't close my eyes. I kept them on Laura, watching her smile at a joke from my father, nod thoughtfully at her mother's stories, playing the role of gracious hostess. When dinner ended, I ushered everyone back into the living room. The conversation still flowed easily, memories and anecdotes passing around like plates of sweets. I suggested we open gifts before dessert this year, switching our usual order. Both sets of parents found it charming. Why not shake things up? Laura and I distributed the standard gifts first: scarves, books, sweaters, small tokens of appreciation. The parents were pleased. smiling and thanking us warmly. Laura thanked my parents for a hardcover novel, flipping through its pages as if truly touched. She did it well, pretending everything was normal. All the while, the wooden box waited at the back of the pile, and I saved it for last. Eventually, Laura noticed one present still untouched under the tree. "What's that one?" she asked curiously. I turned, posture relaxed, and retrieved the box. "This," I said, "is something special I've been working on for you, Laura." I met her eye, letting a hint of certainty show. "I wanted to give it to you at the end so it gets the attention it deserves." Laura's parents looked intrigued. My parents exchanged a puzzled glance. Laura tilted her head, a cautious smile on her lips. "You didn't have to do anything extravagant," she said modestly. I shrugged lightly and carried the box over, placing it in her hands. "It's Christmas," I said. "A time for honesty and sharing what truly matters." I thought this was the perfect moment. The room quieted. Laura ran a finger along the wrapping paper, then carefully removed it, revealing the simple wooden box. On top lay the envelope, the words "Merry Christmas, Laura" written in neat handwriting. She hesitated, perhaps expecting a heartfelt note or some thoughtful memento. "Go ahead," I encouraged, voice steady. "Open the envelope first." Everyone leaned in slightly, curious. Laura slipped a finger under the flap and withdrew a single folded sheet of paper. Her brow furrowed as she unfolded it. Silence descended, punctuated only by the faint crackle of the fireplace. She scanned the words, and I watched her face closely. No one else could see the note yet. It wasn't long, just 3 words in simple, clear handwriting. "I know everything." Laura's eyes flicked up, meeting mine. Confusion, fear, and a sudden flicker of panic danced across her features. Her parents exchanged puzzled looks. My parents leaned forward, sensing something amiss. The atmosphere changed, as if the air had thickened. "What does it say, dear?" her mother asked, breaking the silence. Laura swallowed, her mouth working silently before she managed to speak. It just says, 'I know everything,'" she repeated, voiced faint. My mother's brows knitted together. My father looked at me quizzically. Laura's father opened his mouth to ask a question but hesitated, seeing the tension between his daughter and me. A charged hush fell over the room, the ornaments on the tree shimmering in the uncertain light. I said nothing, not yet. Letting the weight of those 3 words settle was important. Laura clutched the note, knuckles whitening, her gaze darting from me to the box and back again. Somewhere deep inside, she must have understood this was no ordinary gift. In that moment, the warm glow of the holidays felt like a stage spotlight, illuminating every crack in the facade. Laura sat on the edge of a revelation that would change everything. I could see puzzle pieces turning in her head. My recent calm, my lack of confrontation, the saving of this special gift for last. She knew I was not joking. I held my silence, letting the tension coil. The next chapter of this confrontation would begin soon, but I wanted everyone to feel the gravity of this note first. A perfect, brittle hush enveloped us, the kind that precedes a thunderclap. "Merry Christmas, Laura," I thought, repeating the words in my head. She would soon learn what they truly meant. Chapter 8, Unwrapping the Truth. Silence weighed on the room as if someone had turned gravity up a notch. The only sounds were the soft crackle of the fireplace and the faint hum of the heating system. Laura clutched the note in her hands, the 3 words, "I know everything," still visible. Our parents looked on, confused and uneasy, glancing between us for an explanation. My heart pounded, but I kept my face composed. This was the moment I'd planned for, the culmination of weeks of careful strategy. No outburst, no screaming. I wanted the evidence to speak for itself. I stepped forward, standing beside the chair where Laura sat, the wooden box still resting on her lap. "Laura," I said quietly, my voice calm, "I'm sure you have questions. So does everyone else." I looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes. My parents puzzled and worried. Laura's parents suddenly fearful. Laura herself frozen, color draining from her cheeks. "What's going on here?" her mother asked, voice trembling slightly. I inhaled slowly. "What's going on," I said, addressing the entire group, "is that I've discovered Laura has been lying to me for months about where she's been, about who she's with, and about the promises we made to each other when we married." I kept my tone measured, factual. I wanted everyone here to see the truth at the same time, to ensure there's no misunderstanding. Laura's eyes widened in a panic. "Wait," she said, voice cracking. "What are you talking about?" Her attempt at confusion sounded hollow. I leaned down and lifted the tissue paper inside the wooden box, revealing the neat stack of printed documents beneath. In the soft glow of the Christmas lights, the papers looked harmless, just ink on paper. But I knew better, and soon they all would too. "I've prepared a record," I said evenly, "of messages, dates, and photographs. They showed where Laura was when she said she was working late or shopping, who she was texting when she guarded her phone, and how long this has been going on." I paused, letting that sink in. I have hotel receipts, timestamp photos, and transcripts of text messages. It's all here. Laura tried to stand, but her legs seemed to fail her. She gripped the arm of the chair. This can't be real," she sputtered. "You're mistaken, or someone set you up." I cut her off, still calm. "Please don't insult our family's intelligence, Laura. I've been careful, thorough, and patient." I turned to her parents, who sat stunned, hands clasped together. "I'm sorry you have to see this," I told them gently, "but I want you to understand the depth of the betrayal." My own parents looked stricken. My mother pressed a hand to her mouth. My father frowned deeply, anger and sadness mixing in his eyes. Neither spoke yet, as if unsure how to process what I was laying out. Slowly, I removed a few papers from the top of the stack and held them out. "These are transcripts of text messages between Laura and another man," I said, careful not to raise my voice. "I've highlighted the dates and references to times she claimed to be at the office. You can match them to our calendar. The nights I thought she was working overtime or out shopping for gifts." Laura's father cleared his throat. "This can't be right," he said, voice shaking. "Laura, tell him he's misunderstood." But Laura said nothing. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her face had lost all color. She darted a desperate glance at her mother, then at me. In her eyes, I saw fear and perhaps a flicker of shame. She must have known I wouldn't do this lightly. She must have recognized I'd never present false accusations in front of all these people. I stepped in closer to the coffee table and placed the pages there, where everyone could see them if they chose. Then I held up another set of papers. "These are photographs from a private investigator I hired," I said, voice steady. "You'll see Laura entering hotels, sitting in restaurants with this man, and leaving his apartment building late at night. The dates match the messages." My father inhaled sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. My mother shook her head, tears gathering at the corners. Laura's mother began to tremble. Her father clenched his fists in his lap. Laura herself seemed to shrink back into the chair, as if wanting to disappear. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Words failed her now. "I know this is painful," I continued. "I never wanted to humiliate anyone. But given the months of lies and the care Laura took to maintain her deception, I felt it was the only way to ensure we start from a place of truth. No half confessions, no spin." Laura tried again, voice thin and brittle. We can talk about this privately. Why are you doing this here, now?" Her eyes pleaded with me. I met her gaze without blinking. "Because privately, you've denied and dismissed my concerns. Privately, you could attempt to twist the story, claim I misunderstood or acted irrationally. I wanted our families, who trusted in our marriage, to see what happened. I want them to know I'm not making baseless accusations." Her father's voice broke through, choked with disbelief. "Laura, you owe us an explanation." He looked at his daughter as if she were a stranger. Her mother dabbed at her eyes, too stunned to form words. Laura swallowed hard. Her voice cracked. She licked her lips and tried again. I never meant for it to go so far, she managed, eyes downcast. I felt trapped or bored, I don't know. She let out a shaky breath. It just happened, and Don't, I said softly but firmly. Don't insult me or them by pretending this was accidental. You planned these meetings, lied about your whereabouts, mocked my trust in your messages. I pointed to a highlighted passage on one of the transcripts, quoting her words, "He has no idea," laugh out loud. I let those words hang in the air. My parents flinched at the cruelty. Laura's mother covered her face with her hands, sobbing quietly. Her father stared at the floor, jaw tight. My father shook his head in silent fury, and my mother wiped tears from her eyes, heartbreak in every line of her posture. For a moment, no one spoke. The holiday decorations, the soft glow of the tree, the carefully prepared dinner, all seemed grotesquely out of place now. This was supposed to be a day of family unity, yet here we were, dissecting a betrayal with printed evidence and stunned silence. I took a deep breath, turning back to Laura. I also want you to know, I said, voice cool, that I've spoken to a lawyer. Divorce papers are ready to be filed. I saw her flinch at that, and I pressed on. You forfeited your right to fairness and negotiation when you chose to do this behind my back for months on end, mocking my trust. Laura tried to protest, voice quivering. Please, can we have a moment alone to talk? Her eyes shone with panic, tears threatening. No, I said, shaking my head. You had plenty of moments alone. All I got were lies. Now, everyone sees what I've been dealing with. I turned to the parents, voice gentler. I'm sorry you had to witness this. I know it's painful, but I hope you understand now why I had to do it this way. My mother stood, tears slipping down her cheeks. Oh, my dear boy, she whispered, stepping forward and pulling me into a hug. The warmth and sadness in that embrace nearly broke my composure, but I held steady. My father joined us, placing a firm hand on my shoulder, his face hard but supportive. Laura's parents sat in shock, barely moving. Eventually, her father rose, trembling slightly, and approached the coffee table. He picked up a page of messages, scanned a few lines, then sat it down as if it burned his fingers. Her mother sobbed openly now, pressing a handkerchief to her face. Laura tried one last time. I never meant to hurt anyone. Her words fell flat, echoing hollowly in the charged silence. I pulled away from my parents, standing straight. But you did, I said evenly, and now we're here. Actions have consequences. She looked at me, desperation and shame mixing on her face. There were no words left for her to wield, no plausible denial. The evidence was too clear, my determination too strong. I turned to my parents-in-law. I know this is hard, I said softly. I loved your daughter, and I believed in our marriage. I wanted to spend this holiday celebrating with all of you, sharing warmth and trust. Instead, I gestured to the papers. I'm sorry. They nodded numbly, struggling to find a response. Laura's father managed a quiet, I don't know what to say. Her mother couldn't speak at all, just shook her head, tears streaming. My parents stood beside me, shoulders set, offering silent solidarity. The cheerful decorations, the candles, the holiday scent, all seemed mocking now, but I felt a strange calm wash over me. The truth was out. There would be no more secrets, no more hollow traditions. I had taken back control of the narrative she tried to twist. I stepped towards the hallway. I think, I said, voice low but firm, that it's best if everyone takes a moment. I'll be filing for divorce immediately. Laura, I expect you to collect your belongings soon. We can arrange a time with legal guidance. Laura's head bowed, tears slipping down her cheeks. She said nothing to stop me. She knew it would be futile. Without waiting for anyone's reply, I moved to the foyer. My parents followed, and I could hear soft sobs and murmured words behind me. The front door's cold knob felt grounding under my hand. Outside, snow still fell softly, indifferent to the drama unfolding inside these walls. The world kept turning, as it always does, even when illusions shatter. In that moment, I knew that the family bonds, while shaken, would survive in some altered form. My parents and I would heal. Her parents would have to reconcile their image of their daughter with her actions. As for Laura, she would face the consequences of her choices without my protection. I stepped onto the porch, breathing in the crisp winter air. Despite the bitterness of the situation, I felt oddly lighter. The truth was out. I had done what needed to be done, ensured everyone saw who she really was, and reclaimed my dignity in the process. Inside, I knew conversations would continue, tears and anger flowing, but I had said my piece. The evidence spoke louder than any denial, and the silent snowfall bore witness to the quiet, irrevocable end of our marriage. Chapter 9, Splintered Reflections. The porch was quiet and cold. A light snowfall drifted through the still air, blanketing the front yard in gentle white. I stood at the edges of the steps, breathing in the crisp scent of winter. Behind the closed door, I could imagine what was happening. My parents and in-laws trying to process their shock, Laura's tears, the confusion thick in the air. Yet I felt no urge to return and comfort anyone. Not now. I'd done what I came to do, and I needed a moment alone with the night. After a minute, the door opened softly. My father stepped outside, pulling his coat tight against the chill. He approached quietly, as if not to startle me. I turned slightly to acknowledge him, catching a glimpse of sadness and pride mingling in his eyes. "Son," he said, voice hushed, I don't know what to say." His brow furrowed and he gazed toward the dark, empty street, as if searching the silent snowfall for words. "I'm sorry you had to go through all of this." I nodded. "Thanks, Dad," I replied, my voice steady. I appreciated his presence. He had always been a man of few words, someone who believed actions spoke louder. Tonight, I'd let actions and evidence speak for me. My mother joined us soon after, hugging her arms to herself against the cold. She looked at me with watery eyes. "You didn't deserve this," she said quietly. "I wish I'd known something was wrong. We could have helped." I reached out and gently squeezed her hand. "You couldn't have known," I said. I kept it to myself until I was sure. No point causing worry without proof. She nodded, tears slipping free despite her attempts to contain them. I let her have that moment. My parents weren't just witnessing my heartbreak, they were experiencing their own form of betrayal, having welcomed Laura into our family, and now seeing her true face exposed. The door opened again. Laura's parents stepped out together. Her mother's face was blotchy from crying, her father's expression grim. They hesitated, seeing me and my parents gathered on the porch. My parents moved slightly, not leaving my side, but giving them space to approach. Laura's father cleared his throat, taking a careful step forward. He looked as if he'd aged a decade in an hour. I'm sorry," he managed, voice strangled. "I never thought my daughter would do something like this." I met his gaze. A strange pity welled up inside me. He had raised her, cared for her, believed in her decency. Now he faced a reality that shattered those beliefs. "I know," I said softly. "I'm sorry you had to witness it this way." His eyes filled with regret. "I wish we'd known," he murmured, voice cracking. "Could we have stopped this? Helped somehow?" I shook my head gently. She hid it too well. None of us knew until it was too late. Laura's mother began to sob quietly, pressing a handkerchief to her face. My mother, ever compassionate, stepped forward and rested a comforting hand on her shoulder. The two women stood together, one trying to console, the other inconsolable. I saw then that this betrayal stretched beyond Laura and me. Everyone here carried scars now. Laura's father looked at me, eyes pleading for understanding. "We'll take her home with us," he said, words halting. "You shouldn't have to host anyone after this." I appreciated their decision. I told my parents earlier I didn't want to be alone until everyone had left, and they agreed to stay by my side. Now that Laura's family had come outside, it seemed the departure was imminent. "Thank you," I said, voice steady. "I think it's best if you take her. I'll handle the legal steps from here." He nodded heavily. "We respect your decision. We understand why you did this." I inclined my head. It was necessary for everyone to see the truth. They hovered uncertainly, then returned inside. I knew they'd gather Laura and her things and leave shortly. My parents looked to me, waiting for my lead. "Let's go back in for a moment," I told them quietly. "I don't want to leave anything unsaid. Then we'll let them go, and after that, you can head home too." My mother nodded, tears still in her eyes, and my father gave me a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder. Together, we stepped back into the warmth of the house. Inside, the atmosphere was tense and surreal. The Christmas lights still glowed on the tree, casting gentle patterns across the floor. Laura stood by the window, shoulders trembling, her parents flanking her, murmuring words of disappointment and confusion. She looked over as we entered, eyes red and puffy. My parents stayed close behind me, silent pillars of support. I approached the center of the room slowly, controlling my breathing. The silence pressed in, broken only by Laura's muffled sobs and the soft hum of the heater. Laura's father cleared his throat. "We'll take her now," he said, voice barely steady. "Give you space." I nodded. "That's for the best." Laura's mother took her daughter's arm gently. Laura resisted at first, eyes searching my face. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice raw. "I never meant—" I stopped her with a raised hand. "It's done," I said quietly. "There's nothing left to say tonight." My parents watched with drawn faces. My mother's eyes shone with sympathy for everyone involved. My father's jaw clenched tight at the injustice of it all. They said nothing. This was my battle, and I'd already fought it. Laura's parents guided her towards the foyer. She moved stiffly as if in a trance. Before she crossed the threshold, she looked back once more, tears glinting. I met her gaze without flinching. The silence between us said everything. Regret on her side, firm resolution on mine. The door opened, letting in a gust of cold air and a swirl of snowflakes. They stepped onto the porch and into the night, disappearing into the swirling white. I closed the door behind them gently, cutting off the sound of her muffled sobs. Now it was just me and my parents in the hushed living room. The house felt different, hollow yet oddly calm. I turned to them, forcing a small, weary smile. "Thank you for staying," I said softly. It helped knowing I wasn't alone. My mother rushed forward and embraced me, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Oh, my boy," she murmured, voice thick with sorrow. "I'm so sorry." I let her hold me, closing my eyes and breathing in the familiar scent of home and comfort. My father stepped close, resting a firm hand on my back. We stood there, a triangle of support and shared pain, until my mother pulled back, wiping her cheeks with trembling fingers. "You handled yourself with dignity," my father said, his voice low and steady. "I'm proud of you, even though it breaks my heart that you had to go through this." I nodded, throat tight. I had to show everyone the truth. Now there are no secrets, no misunderstandings. My mother glanced around at the decorations. "We should help you straighten up before we go," she offered, eyes flicking to the untouched dessert and half-finished plates. I considered it, then shook my head gently. "I'll handle it," I said. "I might need some time alone, just to process." They hesitated, torn between wanting to support me and respecting my need for solitude. Finally, my father nodded. "We understand," he said quietly, "but promise you'll call us soon." "I promise," I said, giving a faint smile. "Thank you for everything." My mother kissed my cheek, and my father clasped my hand, and they left quietly, their departure much calmer than Laura's. I watched their car pull away, taillights glowing red against the snowy darkness. Alone now, I surveyed the house. The silence pressed in again, but this time it felt different, less suffocating. I had cast out the lies, laid bare the betrayal, and now I stood on the other side of it. My marriage was over, but so was the uncertainty and suspicion that had gnawed at me for weeks. I moved methodically, blowing out candles, turning off the gentle holiday music that still played, absurdly cheerful. The pile of evidence remained on the coffee table. I gathered it up, returning it to the wooden box. I would store it away for the legal proceedings. After that, maybe I'd burn it or shred it. For now, it was a record of what had been and what would never be again. In the kitchen, I covered the leftovers and placed them in the fridge. I wiped down the counters, stacked the dishes, and put away the untouched dessert. Each simple act felt like reclaiming my home from the chaos of the evening. Soon, the house was quiet and orderly once more, if emptier. I wandered to the living room, hesitating before the Christmas tree. Should I turn it off? The idea of basking in darkness appealed, but I left it on. Its soft glow reminded me that life continued. This holiday may be ruined, but I wouldn't let it define all future celebrations. Exhaustion pressed down on me, physical and emotional. I climbed the stairs to the bedroom, noting how cold and still the house felt without another person's presence. But at least now I knew where I stood. No more deception lurking in the shadows. I settled into bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, I would contact my lawyer, finalize the divorce steps, and face the family fallout. Friends would learn of what happened, questions would be asked, and I would answer calmly. I had the truth on my side. As I closed my eyes, I let myself feel the swirl of emotions. Sadness for what I've lost, relief that the facade was over, anger at her choices, and a quiet determination to move forward. The night embraced me, and I drifted into a restless sleep, alone but honest with myself. Outside, the snowfall continued, erasing footprints and smoothing rough edges. Inside, I lay unburdened by secrets, aware that healing would take time, but hopeful that one day I could look back and know I did what was necessary. Chapter 10: Clearing the Ground. Morning arrived slowly, light seeping through the bedroom curtains, painting soft shapes on the walls. The house was quiet, no muffled voices, no rustling from another person getting ready for the day. I sat up in bed, feeling the weight of exhaustion still pressing on my shoulders. The night before had been long, but I'd managed to sleep, albeit fitfully, and now I faced a new day in a new reality. I rose, showered, and dressed with mechanical efficiency. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked tired but resolute. No more second guessing, no more knots of suspicion tightening in my chest. It was over. The marriage, the lies, the uncertainty, they lay behind me like scorched earth after a fire. Downstairs, the living room felt different in the morning light. The Christmas tree stood quietly, its lights still twinkling. I decided to unplug them, ending the holiday display that had witnessed so much turmoil. The ornaments reflected my shadow as I packed them away into boxes, handling each carefully. I hadn't planned to take it down so soon, but this Christmas was already ruined. Better to clear the ground for something new. I wrapped the ornaments in tissue, stowed the boxes in a closet, and folded the tree's branches until it fit in its old cardboard container. Soon, the living room wore a simpler, cleaner look, just bare furniture and sunlight. I had a voicemail from my lawyer, Kelsey, waiting on my phone. She'd called early, anticipating I'd want to move quickly. I stepped outside onto the porch and returned her call. The air was crisp, my breath misting. Kelsey picked up on the second ring. "I heard from your email," she said, voice professional but warm. "I'm sorry about what happened, but I'm glad you have clarity now. Are you ready to proceed with filing the divorce papers?" "Yes," I said firmly. "The sooner, the better." She outlined the next steps. I'd come by her office to sign the final documents, and then she'd file them with the court. Given the evidence of adultery and my thorough preparation, the divorce should move swiftly. Adultery laws in our state wouldn't grant me a windfall, but they'd ensure a fair settlement that favored me, at least in terms of emotional closure and avoiding protracted negotiations. After ending the call, I lingered on the porch for a moment, watching the world go about its business. Cars rolled down the street, children laughed somewhere in the distance, life continued, indifferent to my personal drama. That felt oddly reassuring. My problems, monumental to me, were just another story in the vast world. I took a breath and stepped back inside, resolute. Before leaving for the lawyer's office, I sorted through a few more items in the house. I found old photos of happier times with Laura, vacations, birthdays, previous Christmases. I felt a pang of loss, remembering those moments with genuine warmth. But I also knew those moments were now tainted. and clinging to them would only make me question what was real. Instead of destroying them, I stored them in a box and placed it in a rarely used closet. Maybe one day I'd look at them with a calmer heart, or maybe I'd never look at them again. Either way, I'd set them aside to focus on the present. The drive to Kelsey's office was quiet. The radio played softly, a neutral hum of conversation and light music, but I barely registered it. My thoughts drifted to my parents, who would no doubt call soon, checking if I was okay. I decided I'd invite them over for dinner in a week or two once the dust settled. We might share a simpler holiday meal then. No decorations, no grand gestures, just a quiet acknowledgement that life goes on. At the lawyer's office, Kelsey greeted me with a sympathetic nod. She spread the papers before me, explained the details, and I signed where needed. The pen glided across the pages, each signature freeing me from a piece of the past. When we finished, she stacked the documents neatly. "I'll file these today," she said gently. "We'll serve Laura through official channels. Given the evidence, I don't expect a fight, but if there is one, we're prepared." "Thank you," I said, grateful for her calm competence. "Your help made this easier than it could have been." She nodded. "Focus on your own well-being now. The legal side will be taken care of." Leaving her office, I realized I felt lighter. The legal aspect had weighed on me, but now it was in motion. I didn't have to rush back home. I had the day to myself. On impulse, I stopped by a local coffee shop I used to visit before I got married, back in simpler time. The aroma of freshly ground beans and warm pastries enveloped me as I stepped inside. I ordered a cappuccino and sat by the window. People passed by outside, bundled in coats, carrying shopping bags, laughing and talking. I sipped my drink, letting the warmth spread through my chest. My phone buzzed. A text from my father. "We love you. Call when you're ready." I smiled, reassured by their steady presence. I would call them tonight. For now, I savored this moment of quiet independence. No one waiting at home. No lies hanging over my head. Just me, the coffee, and the world moving along. In the following days, I settled into a new routine. Laura's parents emailed once, apologizing again and expressing hope that I would find peace. I answered briefly, thanking them for their understanding and wishing them well. I bore them no ill will. This wasn't their fault. They deserved healing too. Laura herself tried reaching out through a text. "Can we talk?" I hesitated only a moment before replying, "The lawyers will handle everything. There is nothing more to say." She didn't press further. I guess she knew any attempts to soften my stance were doomed. Trust, once shattered, cannot be patched over with a few words. I found small comforts in taking care of my home. I rearranged furniture, vacuumed, dusted, and made minor repairs I'd been putting off. Without the tension that had haunted the house, I discovered a quiet satisfaction in maintaining my space. I set up a new reading nook near a window, placed a comfortable chair, and a small shelf of favorite books. In the evenings, I read without distraction, letting stories carry me to distant worlds where my own troubles faded for a while. The day the divorce was finalized, a few swift weeks later, felt anticlimactic. I received a call from Kelsey confirming everything was done. No contentious hearings, no ugly disputes. Laura had accepted the terms, likely ashamed to drag things out. I thanked Kelsey, ended the call, and stood in my living room absorbing the news. The marriage was officially over. I sat in the reading chair and opened the window a crack, letting in the cold winter air. The distant hum of traffic mixed with the faint rustle of wind. I didn't cry or exult, I just breathed deeply, acknowledging that I was free. That evening, I called my parents. We talked for an hour, not just about the divorce, but about small things. My father's plans for a spring fishing trip, my mother's experiments with new cookie recipes, my own intention to maybe repaint the living room a brighter color. We laughed, and the tension that had gripped us for so long eased. They suggested we have a simple dinner soon, and I agreed. A new tradition perhaps, something that didn't rely on forced cheer, but honest connection. Over the following weeks, I began reaching out to close friends, people I'd been too distracted or tense to spend time with. Without revealing every detail, I let them know I'd gone through a difficult breakup and could use their company. Some invited me out for drinks or walks in the park. Reconnecting felt good, like remembering who I was before all this pain. Their presence reminded me that my world was not reduced to one failed marriage. I had a life beyond that, filled with potential and kindness. Spring approached, bringing longer days and the promise of change. I cleared out old clothes and items I no longer needed, donating them. I planned small weekend trips, short drives to nearby towns, hikes through forests just to feel the earth under my feet. Each step away from the past was deliberate. Occasionally, thoughts of Laura still pricked at my mind, wondering if she regretted her choices, if she learned anything from this. But I let those thoughts drift by without lingering. It wasn't my job to understand her now or forgive her. I owed myself the dignity of moving on, not the burden of analyzing her motives. One afternoon, I realized I hadn't checked the box of old photos for weeks. I could have opened it to test my emotions, see if I felt anger or nostalgia. Instead, I left it where it was. The future deserved my attention more than the past. As time passed, I found that my resentment dulled, replaced by a calm acceptance. I had survived the betrayal and emerged stronger, more self-reliant. I no longer needed to stage grand reveals to prove the truth. I carried the truth within me, a steady compass guiding my steps. In quiet moments, I thought back to the confrontation on Christmas Day, the shock on everyone's faces, the sadness and tears. It had been awful, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes healing requires a clean break, a painful exposure that leaves no room for lies. I had done what needed to be done, and now I was living proof that one can face betrayal and still find hope on the other side. On a clear morning near the end of March, I woke early, brewed coffee, and stepped outside onto my porch. Birds sang in the bare branches, and the air smelled faintly of damp earth, as if the world were ready to blossom again. I sipped my coffee and smiled at the thought of painting the living room a fresh shade of light blue. I considered calling my parents later to invite them for dinner, maybe try one of those new recipes my mother mentioned. I felt the day unfolding with quiet possibilities. I was no longer defined by the marriage that ended or the spectacle that had exposed it. Instead, I was defined by the choices I made in its aftermath, choosing honesty over denial, dignity over rage, growth over stagnation. The future was mine to shape. And so, as the seasons turned and life resumed its gentle rhythms, I moved forward. Not unchanged, but unbroken. Not bitter, but wiser. Clearing the ground after the storm, making room for something new to grow. This was a very large departure from what we normally do on the channel here, and I'm not going to put too many comments at the end here because I know this is already about 2 hours long. All I'd like to know is what you all thought of this story. If you're on YouTube, make sure you comment down below. And if you're on the podcast, what better time to head over to YouTube at Karma Stories Podcast, jump down below and leave a comment. If you enjoy daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and add us to your favorites on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.